MC, we have a dynamic legendary MP Vijay Kumar sir, and also one of the great orator Naveen Vishweshwaraiah sir on the stage with us. We welcome you, sir, for this CA Students Conference to 2020-21 on virtual mode. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you and good evening to all.
Dear patrons, it's time to gear up ourselves for the next special session on high performance through brain coherence.
Now, I call upon Kanchana to take over the session as a session MC.
Over to you.
Kanchana.
योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां Patanjalim Pranjali Ranatosmi. A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to introduce our special session speaker, Dr. Naveen Vishweshwaraiah. He is a consulting integrative medicine physician and an accomplished yoga researcher. He serves as a professor at University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. He is India's first qualified yoga and neuropathy physician. He established India's first chain of clinics in India and USA for integrative medicine called Yogakshema Clinic for stress, pain, lifestyle nutrition, offering evidence-based traditional medicine for metabolic and diseases, mental health and all forms of cancers. We are all happy for your presence and we heartily welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Over to MCs.
So we request you to take over the session.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Can you guide me to the icon where I can share my screen? I have few sets of slides. I'm used to the other platforms. I don't see a screen share here.
So now you can share your screen.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I will have to open that. Okay.
Yes, sir, we are able to see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Very good evening, and I'm so glad to be back here. For about a couple of years ago, I was very glad to be introduced to this institution and to the group of aspiring students. We had physical sessions then, and it was very, very exciting. I always looked at CA as one of the challenging profession, and thereon it remains challenging, crunching numbers, strategies, and advising entrepreneurs to excel, and thereby contributing to the growth of the nation. While we study neuroscience, my specialization has been neurophysiology, and we looked at yoga and meditation and its impact on human brain and nervous system. We always looked at human brain, which has two distinct facets. One, as we say, the left brain, and the other one is right brain, where much of our social reward system that drives value and activity in the society is always inclined towards left brain. So which is why much of the right brain activities and right brain interests in a child, in a young adult, is always more seen as a passion, a weekend activity, as opposed to left brain activity, which is always meant for livelihood, just simply because the society rewards left brain outcomes. So it also reminds us in neuroscience that when one has to excel in left brain scholastic performance as that of yours, we need to make sure that our brains are functioning optimally, and while it's engaged optimally, it has to undergo least impact or damage to remain optimally functioning. And that can happen only with what we call in neuroscience hemispheric balance, where right and left brain has to function, if not equally, relatively equal. I loved the statement of my previous speaker, Mr. J. He answered to one of the questions that I take about 5 hours out for piano and music. And I said, haha, here is a successful person who is taking time for right brain activity. So that is when we looked at engineering, management, and of course, you all in accountancy, where you are so left brain driven, and performance can never be left brain dominant activity alone. So here is a very quick snapshot of what happens to our brain when we engage in left brain, and how the distractions to the brain impact our nervous system, and then how we can come around.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. The slides are not changing.
Yeah, I have not yet started to change.
All right. Okay. Sorry, sir.
I'm giving the preamble. Yeah.
Okay.
So, so the whole idea of the performance is one, how we engage the brain, and how we manage the distractions. And the distractions management is very much part of the right brain activity. So let's look at a quick review of what happens to our brains when we engage in a scholastic focusing activity, and then how we can turn around and tackle the distractions and harness the right brain activity sufficiently so that we have hemispheric balance, thereby ensuring one, excellent performance that all of you are intending to achieve, but more importantly, with least damage, and thereby a sustained performance through your life. Right? So obviously the intervention that I choose today to give example is of that of yoga, where yoga by various scientific experiments has shown to harness right brain than any other activity that is explored so far. We at Yogakshema are engaged in two activities. I use this slide to tell you what integrative medicine is all about. So conventional, energy, herbal, mind, body. Now, more often people use any one of these at any point of time. Simply using all of them together is to ensure optimal healing and, of course, sustaining optimal health. Now, the word Yogakshema is not linked to yoga, the word that is we all know as a part of the activity of yoga itself, a yoga philosophy or yoga as a technique. But here the word yoga is used for acquiring, or that one we are bestowed with. Any human experience is referred to as yoga. And once we like an experience, we want to preserve such an experience, be it a person, place, or a thing. And that is kshema. So the whole life is basically acquiring good stuff or any stuff and shifting in our brain and making sure that we preserve good stuff. So that is why Krishna says, if you take care of my global agenda, my divine agenda, I will take care of your Yogakshema. So in our case, we all should be engaged in acquiring and preserving that's good for us. Now let's look at this, a very simply put picture here. Now emotion versus thinking. Thinking is a very conscious, logical process. Now emotion is also a thought. For brain, it really doesn't matter whether it's a good thought, bad thought, or it's an emotional thought or a strategic or a planning thought. For brain, it's all simply an electrical activity. Thought is a thought. So now what differentiates an emotional thought to a thought which is with reason, which is commonly referred to as thinking? Now, emotion comes by definition a thought which has no reasoning. When I say I like somebody, when I say I don't like somebody, I really can't give a logical explanation to that. So emotion, therefore, is a very illogical, impulsive, instinctive act or a feeling. Now, when somebody goes through an emotional thought versus a thought with reason, this is what happens to the brain. Now, when we are engaged in an activity, if I'm not entrenched with emotion, either related to scholastic activity, for example, the outcome of the CA exam itself or CA career itself, or any other emotional entanglement that one person of your age can have, then what happens? There is a little pink dot that you see called amygdala, the yellow thing, brainstem, which is simply keeps us alive. The whole brain is seized by this little thing called amygdala, and it either releases us to be under the control of higher cortex, which is a orange thing right there, which is a cauliflower, or it simply disables it. So when it's simply that when amygdala is active, higher cortex is not active. So emotion driven reaction. So most reactions that we do or demonstrate is when amygdala is taking over and sleeping or making higher cortex disabled. So if we have anger, fear, excitement, love, hate, disgust, frustration, or any emotion, positive or negative, we are simply playing into the hands of amygdala, and therefore we, on our own will, disabling higher cortex. But if we keep our emotion either related to the task or otherwise in our life low, then a scholastic activity can be enabled through higher cortex, as you see in the left quadrant. So we need to keep our emotion low and separate whenever we want to engage our brain for scholastic left brain activity. That's very easy to say. Now, how do we regulate that? Now, typically, this is how brain works, like any other system. There is an input and there's an output. So if the sensory output comes from 5 senses, if it is emotionally driven, then amygdala does not engage prefrontal cortex, as in the second example. It takes us to what is called fight, flight, freeze response. More often, this is called as stress response. And if amygdala is not given a sensory stimulus, which is with emotion, it engages, allows, passes on that so-called blunted strategic thought with full of reason into prefrontal cortex, so that our frontal cortex, which is in the front of the head, the most evolved new part of the brain, takes over, and that's how we excel in whatever we do. Now, what is this fight, flight, or freeze response? Now, when I want to react something to which is not pleasant or very demanding or overwhelming, I do one of the two things. Either I fight if I can do it, or I flee if it is beyond my capacity. But there is an interesting third response for new age circumstances. We call it freeze response. So there is some kind of a cold feet or a numbness feeling. We simply do not know what to do, either to fight or fly. So all of these are simply referred to as stress response. So if prefrontal cortex is disabled, it's called stress response. And if prefrontal cortex is enabled, it's called relaxation response. Now, in yoga texts, more often, student asks the question to the guru, and the guru is obliged to answer. And based on the quality of the question, the student is analyzed or assessed to be good or bad. So in one of such interaction called Upanishad, a student asks, what would be the simplest way to understand stress? And the guru says, speed. So we often think and we love that being fast enough, being quick is a good thing. Yes, indeed, it's a good thing. But then how can speed be stress? So there's a very delicate information here. That is, we need to think slow so that we can act fast. So more often what we do the reverse. We think fast and we are not so equipped to act fast. And wherever we try to act fast, it will be full of errors. So when yoga or Upanishad is saying that stress is speed, it is speed in thought. You might have observed that a stress response, either fight or flight or freeze, or any emotional reaction is full of speed. One cannot express emotion very calmly, very slowly. We all pick up the speed in our breathing, in our thinking, in our speaking, in everything that we do, or jittery movements of our body or hands or legs, everything is picked up to a higher pace when we are in stress response. So, simply put, we need to think slow and act fast, as opposed to thinking fast and acting fast with error or acting slow. So there is another input here. There is a coherence between heart and brain. We know that our brain functions are so kind of master control, and the best control of brain is through its control on heart. But little we knew until recently that heart has a very strong feedback system to the brain. So whenever we feel emotion or emotional responses or stress responses, the amygdala or the peripheral system engages heart, and heart sends the feedback to the brain. So heart has an overriding effect on the brain. Even if I want to be calm, if I'm emotionally or a thought which is no reasoning is occupying me and hence engages my heart and blood pressure and my circulatory system, it has an overriding effect on the brain. So that is where the word comes, simple terms in therapy, is called heart-brain coherence. Now these need to be in coherence. If there's an incoherence there, then there is a poor or damaged or harmful performance. So this picture is not so, I'm sorry about that. So it simply again shows three brains basically, a lower brain which keeps you alive, which gets a constant feedback from the heart, and a middle part called thalamus, and the upper part called brain. So it's a thalamus which is called seat of consciousness, which is very beautifully both under our control, willful control from the top down or from the bottom up, from the animal brain. So it's up to us to give this thalamus a gateway of consciousness, either in the hands of the animal brain, which is below, or at the human brain, which is unique to humans, the cortex, the cauliflower, or the cortical brain. So whenever we are in stress response, we are giving it to the hands of the animal. Whenever we are in relaxation response mode, we're giving it to the cortical cortex. So which means is simply by being relaxed, we are optimizing our brain function and stopping the distractions from below. That's heart and other systems. A quick kind of an overview to all of you. Simply EEG, the electrical activity of the brain, which needs to be in coherence from one part of the brain to the other, which is front and back and left and right. Easiest way to understand coherence. If these parts function in synchrony, then we are at best performance. But before that, when we are functioning, we are in a busy thinking, fast thinking mode. We see what is called the first part, that is beta waves. If we are awake, not drowsy, not sleepy, but very calm, then we see what is called alpha waves. A lot of people misuse this, say alpha meditation and alpha induction. Yes, in partly they're correct, but it's not that simple. But nevertheless, brain has a frequency where we are awake but calm. But then when we are drowsy, it becomes theta, and when we are actually sleeping, it's delta. So the slowest waves keeps us drowsy, sleepy. A medium frequency keeps us calm but awake, but a very high frequency keeps us agitated. So now we know what happens to our brain when we are in different moods. But if there is a coherence, both at the center and the periphery, as I said, heart-brain coherence, we need coherence not just in the brain from the front and back and left and right, but also in our respiration. Look at the first part, there is no coherence. There's a very apparently very rapid and erratic breathing. And then when there's a coherence, there is a very synchronous, steady, low amplitude, deep, slow breathing. So similarly, our heart variation in respect to the respiration also, you see a difference in coherence and no coherence, and blood pressure. Now these three control our performance at the bottom. Now we need to achieve this. We'll come to in a minute, how do we achieve this? It's just a very quick overview of what's happening in your system. And there is nothing philosophical about yoga or meditation when we talk. It's also hardcore neuroscience. If we are able to achieve EEG coherence, firstly, as we saw in the respiration, blood pressure, and heart coherence, then all of that can happen. So everything good that one wants to achieve is shown scientifically to happen, be it intelligence, learning ability, scholastic performance, stability, emotional stability, trade. Trade is how you respond to one situation. State is how you are as a person long term. Neuroticism, some people show panic for every small thing. All of that, then inner capacities, awareness, orientation, reflexes, reasoning, creativity. All of these are faculties of the inner mind. All of it is seem to be doing well with coherent brain. Coherent brain, which is not affected by stress response. Coherent brain, which is not subject to experiencing emotions while we are doing a scholastic task. Now let's come to a very simple technique called meditation. Now for all of you, if you have not done meditation training before or not exposed to an activity of that kind, simply watching oneself is meditation. Now that's a very good starting point. So now all of us do focused attention in our scholastic activity. Now that is where our brains are engaged actively as if we are doing a focused scholastic activity. Meditation also has a part called focused attention, which means it wants to bring focus to a part or a thought that we want to engage and wants to dispel the distractions. So that's a stage of focused attention. Simply watch yourself, that's focused attention. Then a stage comes when people slowly get into this training or practice open monitoring. So you know what is happening around you, what is happening inside your mind. You're not addressing it or attending it or not reacting to it, just a witness. In a lot of spiritual, religious texts, the goal is to make humans witness to their own activity. Now that's open monitoring. And then once we master that, we can transcend. We can simply watch our emotion come and go. That is a very unique, very empowered place to be. So this is all traditional descriptions of meditation and all tested scientifically. Now, let's a quick glance at eyes open. When we are open our eyes to look at anything or engaged in a focused attention, our back of our head, front occipital lobe, much of the back of the brain which engages in a vision is not coherent. As soon as I close my eyes, the distraction is gone. The visual input is the biggest distraction. Then you see some coherence emerging. But if you start to watch yourself, not just close your eyes, you see different parts of the brain start talking to each other in a very symmetrical, coherent way, as I talked about left, right, and front and back regions. Now, all of us are engaged in relaxation when we are tired of focused activity. And we think that that is like engaging our right brain or relaxation response. Yes, as you can see, you have some level of coherence. But if you start to engage in an appreciation or a gratitude state of mood, a positive emotion, look at the quantum of the coherence. It increases globally. Now, globally, when we use the word in neuroscience, across the brain, the whole brain it's a globe. So it's not just passively relaxing that is important. Simply engaging in sharing and appreciating each other gives me a lot of coherence in the brain. So there are a lot of experiments when people have engaged in gratitude or appreciation task for 10 minutes, they're performed in cognitive tasks after, as opposed to relaxation or opposed to just simply focusing on themselves, which is a stress response. Now, this is a very important part. Now, whenever we engage for a task, for a performance task of the left brain, the blue dot part of the brain has to be active. And this is called cingulate cortex. You don't have to remember. But at every relaxation meditation, whatever style, whatever duration one practices, with whatever experience and guidance, this blue part gets activated. So a focused, selective attention. Now you're listening to me. There are noises around you. All of you are sitting in your homes. A lot of noises around you, but you're chasing away those distortions and selectively focused on this particular sound, vision, and coherence in your comprehension of your sound and talk, and that information is coherently taken into your brain. This task is done by the blue dot area of the brain, and that can happen only when you are able to shoo away the disturbing sensory inputs. This gets facilitated when we watch ourselves in meditation or relaxation. Now that's a huge input, neurophysiological. More important is this bigger yellow dot. Now when we are simultaneously sitting and studying and worrying or emotionally distracted, this big yellow dot gets activated. This is called ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Now this is a part of the brain which controls worrying. Now, if I'm worried, the little pink dot that you saw right below, somewhere here, the amygdala, if then that takes control, this orange dot says from the top, look, I am engaged in a scholastic, meaningful, purposeful activity. Do not distract from within. So it's easy to stop people talking. You can lock yourself in a room. External distractions, it's easy to control. Whereas it's internal distractions, it's very hard to control. That is where this orange dot comes handy and help take control and tell the animal brain, the emotional brain, animal brain to say, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want to get up and walk, I want to use do. And the emotional brain to say, I am worrying about the outcome or otherwise any emotional. So this orange dot area says, stop worrying. Now, these two are very, very important to be activated for us to be optimally performed. And that can simply happen by sitting and watching ourselves or watching our breath for about 10 minutes a day can achieve this result that you see on the screen. Finally, you heard and aspiring to be visionary leader. This is a very interesting experiment in Arizona State University. They got some of the successful people who were visionaries in their track record and performance, and somebody who claimed to be not just a worker. They said, okay, I do whatever is given to me. And they did the scanning and look at the difference. A visionary leader engages a very coherently all parts of his brain. Occipital lobe, a very, very programmed visual processing. And then organization of information, that part of the brain is so beautifully, coherently on both sides activated. And then temporal lobe to express what we want to express and communicate to our teams and either subordinates, colleagues, or superiors. Language, comprehension, memory, a very measured expression with emotion. and that's temporal lobe. And frontal lobe, the blue, which is the newest part of the brain, attention, motivation, working memory, executive functions, all that you do is all of these, that is frontal lobe. You see a synchrony there, and you see dysynchrony, a very sketchy, scattered activation of a non-visionary. So in other words, if I am able to be in a calm state, it would look like a visionary leader's brain. So they compared this claimed successful people with people with the meditating, and the activity was similar. And again, a supposedly non-visionary or a routine worker with a very stressed person looked same. So if we start worrying, if we start allowing emotional distraction into our performance or scholastic activity, we'll end up like a brain of a non-visionary with a lot of scattered, non-coherent brain activity, and therefore the performance. But if we engage in more and more relaxation response, and while we are engaging in relaxation response, and as an outcome of that, our brain would look like a brain of a visionary leader, synchrony in the brain activity. So that's what you have to achieve. I'm not sure I'm out of time or within time. If you have a time, I can take questions. And if we have 1 minute, we can do this together. I know it's easy. Easiest way to create this kind of brain activity is to simply hum our brain. So whenever everyone is simply stressed, acutely stressed, bored, or tired of this focused attention, a humming, and in yoga what we call Brahmari, all yoga gurus talk about this. And this can be done in your chair, in your traveling, in your cars. Just a simple low intensity. You don't have to make it loud so that everybody listens to it. Just enough that it is vibration full, able to listen to yourself, can induce a brain, coherent brain, without emotional distraction of that of a visionary leader. If you have about 30 seconds to 1 minute, we can do 3 hummings, and thereafter, based on the amount of time, I am happy to take questions. Please let me know if you're ready to hum or if you have time for hum. Otherwise, it's fine. Thank you.
Sir, you can carry on.
Okay. How much time do we have?
5 minutes, sir.
Wonderful. So I'm sure I don't have to get a response from the audience. All of you who are in this program, you just have to do a participatory act, unlike a monologue that usually conferences are about. So we talked about how do we engage our brain and induce synchrony willfully whenever we want, so that we can enhance our performance. A simplest technique is to create a humming sound and induce a sense of vibration in our skull, that is, in our mouth cavity, nasal cavity, the sinus, and the whole scalp. So all that you have to do is, and you can keep doing this whenever you want, and of course there are people to guide you thereafter to go further. But here is a crash attempt. Just make yourself that you sit straight. Loosen up if you're holding anything, pen or spectacles, you can let go of all of that. And then simply take your index finger and close this outer part of the ear, or if you can close that in your thumb, and then index can go on the eyebrow, the middle can go on the nose, and the last 2 can go on your mouth. Symbolically, to say that I don't want any sensory stimulus: hearing, vision, nose, taste, and of course touch, because you're holding the face. So all 5 senses are turned inwards. So you want to experience your inner self, and now inhale, and then while you exhale, make a humming sound. So let's do this 5 times. Keep your hand gesture like that, and go with me with the instruction of inhale and exhale. Inhale. Just to keep your breath longer, as you inhale, you lift your neck up. As you exhale, bring it back until your chin touches your chest. As much as movement you can do. Inhale. 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 The last round. Inhale. Okay, drop your hands. Thank you. In our clinics, we demonstrate this coherence by putting EEG electrodes on the patients, and when they do 5 chants of this hum, before and after, the brain would look something like this as you see in the screen. It's so instantly active, guaranteed to induce coherence, and I'm sure all of you are experiencing some level of calm and relaxation response. Thank you. Happy to take your questions related to your distractions and how to stay focused to optimally perform.
Any questions, participants? You can just post it in the chat box and sir would answer the same. So kindly glance at the chat box, sir.
Okay, just a second. I need to come out of this.
So there's a question I can help you.
Yeah, please do.
So participants are asking, how many minutes do we have to do the Brahmari exercise?
There's no such thing. If all of these duration and dose is important for a yoga sadhaka or for people who are healing themselves. But for those of us who wants to enhance our performance and periodically want to feel less distracted and want to stay more focused, whenever you feel distracted, internally or externally, whenever you feel fatigued, whenever you feel drowsy, just do this for 3 to 5 times. Rather than sitting for 10 minutes and doing it for a couple of rounds, doing about 3 to 5 times or more, at least up to 9 rounds, as many times, whenever you need, it will be a lot more beneficial.
Okay. So the next question is, how do we avoid the mental distractions which come even though we don't want to have those?
A very common question, a very common thing that happens to all of us from our childhood to at all age. The emotional engagement on anything has to be reduced on a daily basis. So this is a progressive effort. Now, whether it is anything to do with our life or to do with an act of this kind of performance that you are engaged, particularly in your case, you're as a student pursuing your CA or after that pursuing your career. There are 3 elements in our life: career/work, our personal life, and our things that we are passionate about in our social life. It could be politics, it could be religion, it could be anything. We have to stay emotionally disconnected about these 3 things. Passion is important. Pride is not good. So if you look at the positive and negative emotion, passion is a positive emotion. Taking pride in what we are passionate about is a negative emotion. So if we don't identify ourselves in what we want to do, then the emotion and the emotional overdrive over the scholastic focus or attention starts to reduce. So, firstly, disengage your emotionally about the outcome. Now, when Bhagavad Gita says do karma and leave the outcome, it sounds very abstract, but that is how simple it is. It is that moment when you stop thinking about the outcome, or that minute when you stop delinking yourself emotionally with any scholastic act, you start to see the distractions coming down. Most of the time, distractions are about either outcome or of the failure, never about the joy of the act itself. So, emotional disengagement is the way to reduce distraction.
The next question says, how can we overcome the sleepy attitude while studying?
A very nice question. There are two types of people in the world, one with tamas and one with rajas, and both types want to become sattvic, which means balanced. The tamas people are people with lot of inertia, and the rajasic people with hyperactivity. When somebody engages with a scholastic activity with tamasic personality or tamasic food or tamasic company or tamasic setting, then the distraction there is switching off, being drowsy or let go. Whereas people with hyperactivity becomes jittery, becomes restless, becomes hyperactive, becomes impatient. So now we need to understand what type am I? Am I inertia type or am I hyperactive type? If I'm inertia type, I need to do physical activity so that I need to be physically driven so that my mind does not take over, which is inertia. If I'm hyperactive, I need to calm down my mind so that I do no longer become distracting or restless. So it's up to this recognition is very important, and then choose the path.
Okay, so the next question is it right to do yoga just before having lunch?
There are different ways of doing yoga. Now, if you want to do a full-blown 45-minute session, give about at least 45 minutes gap between your session and yoga, because you need to have some time for liquid refueling, because one might lose water, and you don't want to have a sugar rush just about before your lunch. Any physical activity seeks a sugar rush, so we end up probably overeating. So a middle plan, about 1.5 hours after a last meal, and about 45 minutes, 1 hour before your scheduled lunch or a next meal, is way how you can disengage from sugar craving and yet have optimal benefit of doing yoga. But if you do this Brahmari or a simple physical stretch for about anything between 3 to 5 minutes, you can have it anytime.
So the last question, how do we calm the amygdala immediately in a stressful or emotional situation?
Brahmari.
Okay. So I think we are coming to the end of the question session. So thanks a lot, sir, for sharing your valuable insights on the brain and heart coherence and brain coherence in particular. Well, knowledge gives us power, undoubtedly, but the knowledge, this biology stuff, which are left behind and after the school days, all that I can recall now is the medulla oblongata or the thalamus as such. But now I've come to know about amygdala and prefrontal cortex too. So with this, when we study about these or analyze about these, glands or as such, we'll come to know like how do we have to control our emotions so as to harness our energy to the fruitful cause and not just, let it go waste into distractions as such. Thanks a lot, sir.
Pleasure. And, the neuroscience has taken a U-turn, talking of thalamus. Earlier, we thought that our behavior is a very passive response to what our brains did and how our chemicals produced. So we were a silent, helpless manifestation of what our brain chemistry was all about. But now we know our behavior drives the brain. So if I want to feel good, then as if there is a soldier or a tool inside my brain, those parts of the brain areas become active and necessary chemicals get secreted. So it is not the other way around. We simply can decide how to feel and our brain functions accordingly. So brain is simply a tool, not a master that controls us. It's just that we have to realize that and take that driving seat. Thank you.
Yes, that's why it's rightly said. Destiny is in your hands. Mood is in your hands too.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. I hope all of you.